Below is a structured, deeply researched, based on latest available May 2026 reporting, e-commerce news report. Warning note, your request for a 3-hour read aloud length exceeds feasible response limits in this interface. I've created a condensed but dense, professional long-form version that you can scale further if needed. Pushpin e-commerce news deep dive report, May 25, 2026. 10 major developments reshaping global digital commerce, AI, regulation, and risk are rewriting the rules overnight. Warning disclaimer. This content is for informational and news reporting purposes only. It does not constitute legal, financial, medical, or professional advice. News is inherently interpretive and evolving. Do not rely on the following information as a substitute for qualified professional guidance. Any anecdotes, trends, or interpretations should not be treated as actionable advice.
10 en lettres majuscules topic 1, AI Power de Commerce Accélération.
Headline: AI just became the storefront. Are humans still in control of online shopping? AI integration across e-commerce has shifted from experimentation to full deployment, with major platforms embedding conversational shopping assistants and agentic systems directly into purchase workflows. Amazon's transition away from earlier chatbot models toward Alexa-powered shopping agents reflects a deeper strategy of embedding transactional intelligence into search interfaces. CNVC. +1. This evolution is supported by broader platform trends, where AI tools now influence not just discovery, but also pricing, personalization, and inventory forecasting. Retailers are now redesigning digital catalogs using real-time engagement data to dynamically adapt experiences to individual users. E-commerce times. However, this level of automation introduces governance risks, as algorithmic decision-making raises questions about bias, transparency, and consumer protection. Legal frameworks are still catching up, especially where AI-generated offers or ads influence consumer behavior at scale. Legal subtopic: AI governance and liability. AI-driven decision-making in commerce creates emerging liability risks tied to transparency, consent, and algorithmic fairness. Regulators increasingly scrutinize automated pricing tools and algorithmic coordination, especially where systems could unintentionally create anti-competitive behavior. The absence of consistent federal standards complicates compliance across jurisdictions, forcing firms to manage overlapping obligations. AI in marketing also raises disclosure requirements when consumers are interacting with non-human agents. Additionally, liability may extend to developers or vendors of AI systems rather than just retailers deploying them. Courts are examining whether automated outputs qualify as corporate speech or operational decisions. Future litigation may hinge on whether companies exercised adequate control over AI outputs. Businesses must proactively audit AI systems and maintain governance documentation. Hogan levels. Key Captain Topic 2, Platform Wars and Ecosystem Expansion. Headline: E-commerce giants are building empires and regulators are watching closely. Major marketplaces are aggressively expanding capabilities to capture end-to-end commerce journeys, from discovery to fulfillment. Amazon's expansion of rapid delivery networks and integrated AI features signals a push to reduce friction and dominate last-mile logistics. Retail dive. Simultaneously, platforms like Etsy are embedding themselves into AI ecosystems, such as conversational assistants, to capture emerging traffic sources. This signals a broader shift where platform presence is no longer limited to apps or websites, but extends into AI engines and digital assistants. Retail dive. The competitive landscape is further shaped by acquisition attempts and strategic alignment between companies seeking scale advantages. These moves often trigger antitrust concerns, particularly when ecosystem dominance limits competition. Legal subtopic: Antitrust and market dominance. Antitrust scrutiny remains intense in digital markets, particularly around platform control and competitive exclusion practices. Courts and regulators continue examining whether dominant platforms unfairly restrict competitors' access. Ongoing cases involving major tech firms highlight disputes over platform neutrality and self-preferencing. Legal frameworks are evolving to address algorithmic pricing and data sharing concerns. Enforcement agencies increasingly use digital forensics and AI to detect anti-competitive conduct. Cross-border antitrust complexities add another layer of risk for global platforms. Businesses must align strategy with evolving competition laws to avoid litigation. Transparency in marketplace rules is becoming an expectation rather than an option. Bloomberg Law. Key Captain Topic 3. Cross-border trade disruptions. Headline: Tariffs rewrite the global shopping map overnight. Global e-commerce has entered a period of regulatory tightening, particularly around cross-border trade. The elimination of certain duty-free thresholds has disrupted business models that relied on cheap imports. Index box. This has increased costs for retailers and transparency expectations for consumers, who now demand upfront clarity on duties and fees. Logistics adjustments and fluctuating tariffs have also created supply chain volatility. As international commerce grows, regulatory harmonization remains limited, leading to fragmentation and complexity in compliance. Legal subtopic: Trade compliance and tariffs. Tariff policy changes are reshaping competitive dynamics across global e-commerce. Governments are increasingly using trade regulations to protect domestic industries and address pricing disparities. Compliance obligations now extend into checkout processes where duties must be disclosed upfront. Failure to comply may result in Movie camera video title. U.S. e-commerce news roundup, major developments and legal angles, May 25, 2026. Warning disclaimer, include in video plus description. This report is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute legal, medical, financial, or official advice. All content is presented as news and analysis. News is not advice. Do not treat any anecdotal stories as guidance or recommendations. Always consult qualified professionals for advice on law, health, or finance. Bar chart full report. 1. U.S. online retail sales hit new highs. Digital commerce growth defies headwinds. Paragraph 1. The latest government data show U.S. e-commerce sales surging to record levels. In the first quarter of 2026, Americans spent an estimated $326.7 billion online, marking roughly a 9.8% jump from the same period last year. Online shopping's share of total retail reached about 17%, illustrating how digital commerce has become a vital pillar of consumer spending. Analysts attribute the robust growth to resilient consumer demand, heavy discounting from retailers, and wider adoption of mobile shopping. Even amid economic uncertainties and cooling inflation, online retail continues to expand. Movie camera video title. U.S. e-commerce news roundup, major developments and legal angles, May 25, 2026. Warning disclaimer, include in video plus description. This report is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute legal, medical, financial, or official advice. All content is presented as news and analysis. News is not advice. Do not treat any anecdotal stories as guidance or recommendations. Always consult qualified professionals for advice on law, health, or finance. Bar chart full report. 1. U.S. online retail sales hit new highs. Digital commerce growth defies headwinds. Paragraph 1. The latest government data show U.S. e-commerce sales surging to record levels. In the first quarter of 2026, Americans spent an estimated $326.7 billion online, marking roughly a 9.8% jump from the same period last year. Online shopping's share of total retail reached about 17%, illustrating how digital commerce has become a vital pillar of consumer spending. Analysts attribute the robust growth to resilient consumer demand, heavy discounting from retailers, and wider adoption of mobile shopping. Even amid economic uncertainties and cooling inflation, online retail continues to expand faster than overall retail, highlighting the ongoing shift in consumer habits. Census. Paragraph 2. Major shopping categories saw broad gains. Online grocery and household goods orders remain elevated as consumers continue habits formed during the pandemic. Big box retailers and digital marketplaces alike have reported steady double-digit growth in e-commerce revenues, with U.S. online spending far outpacing brick-and-mortar sales growth. Large holidays and seasonal sales like Memorial Day promotions have driven big volume as shoppers increasingly scout deals online. Even older Americans and rural consumers are embracing e-commerce in greater numbers, aided by expanded fulfillment networks that shorten delivery times. Rural broadband improvements mean more households can shop online for essentials, contributing to the wider customer base. With rising comfort and convenience, digital shopping shows few signs of slowing despite questions about how long post-pandemic momentum will last. Census. Paragraph 3. Industry watchers note that online retail growth has been remarkably resilient to economic speed bumps that might have slowed other sectors. Consumer spending patterns have evolved. For instance, more families plan summer travel but continue to buy travel supplies and apparel through e-commerce sites offering competitive pricing. Even as physical stores see traffic returning, overall spending is shifting toward online channels given 24/7 availability and ease of price comparison. E-commerce is now deeply integrated into American lifestyles, driving retailers to continue investing in digital platforms, warehouses, and innovative fulfillment. This milestone underscores how digital commerce is firmly entrenched in U.S. retail, setting the stage for further growth and prompting businesses and regulators to adjust to a digital-first marketplace. Legal subtopics. Subtopic 1. Online sales tax policies have transformed alongside booming e-commerce. In the wake of the Supreme Court's 2018 South Dakota versus Wayfair decision, most states now require remote online retailers to collect sales tax on purchases made by in-state residents. This post-Wayfair legal framework has leveled the playing field for brick-and-mortar stores and pumped billions of dollars into state coffers that had previously been lost to tax-free online sales. As digital commerce reaches new heights, state revenue agencies are ramping up enforcement of online tax compliance, ensuring that e-commerce platforms and third-party sellers alike properly collect and remit sales taxes. Some smaller merchants initially struggled with the complexity of multi-state tax rules, but software solutions and marketplace systems now automate much of the process, helping online retailers meet their obligations to each state's tax laws. Consumer habits have also adjusted. Buyers who were once drawn to untaxed online bargains now largely expect to pay local taxes during digital checkout, similar to in-store purchases. Subtopic 2. Antitrust regulators are paying close attention to e-commerce rising market concentration as a handful of tech giants dominate online retail sales. Amazon remains by far the largest U.S. e-commerce player, with nearly $400 billion in gross merchandise sales in 2024, roughly 2.5 times the volume of Walmart's online sales, and more. Few large platforms could stifle innovation and harm small businesses. Washington lawmakers have floated new legislation to rein in online marketplace monopolies by imposing stricter rules on how massive platforms treat competitors, though no major federal law has yet advanced. The sheer scale of online commerce has raised the stakes of these policy debates, with regulators under pressure to ensure that the benefits of e-commerce growth aren't undermined by anti-competitive behavior.
Merca 20.
Subtopic 3. Transportation and infrastructure regulations are adapting to the e-commerce boom, which has vastly increased delivery volumes. More delivery trucks on roads have led some cities to explore congestion pricing or designated loading zones for package drop-offs, aiming to reduce urban traffic snarls during peak delivery times. Environmental regulators are also eyeing the surge in e-commerce shipments. States like California have enacted rules to phase in zero-emission delivery trucks and vans over the coming decade to cut pollution from last-mile logistics. These changes mean e-commerce companies will eventually need to electrify their fleets and coordinate carriers to comply with progressively stricter emission standards. Postal and shipping regulators have likewise adjusted pricing and service requirements as online orders stress the logistics infrastructure, a dynamic that could influence everything from USPS postal reforms to highway funding geared toward freight. Subtopic 4. Consumer protection agencies are monitoring the retail shift to ensure shoppers' rights remain secure. As Americans buy more goods via websites and apps, regulators emphasize that buyer protections must be as robust online as in stores. The Federal Trade Commission, FTC, and state attorneys general stress that advertised prices and promotions online must be truthful, with clear disclosures if items are limited or backordered. Refund and return policies are also under scrutiny, especially as many retailers adjust return rules. See Topic 10. The explosion of online shopping has also increased the workload of consumer complaint bureaus, which receive issues ranging from delayed deliveries to disputes over subscription dark patterns, where shoppers have trouble canceling online services. Lawmakers and regulators are examining whether additional laws or rules are needed to ensure that digital marketplace transactions uphold the same fairness standards long applied in the physical retail world. Subtopic 5. Small businesses and rural communities are raising policy questions as e-commerce expands. While online retail has opened nationwide markets to many small sellers, some local businesses fear being left behind by bigger players' logistical advantages. Congressional committees are exploring ways to support small vendors in the digital economy, such as improving rural broadband and funding digital skills training, so that independent shops can better reach online customers. At the same time, some local governments worry about the erosion of traditional Main Street retail. 1 in 5 U.S. malls are projected to close by the decade's end amid e-commerce rise, prompting ideas like converting vacant retail spaces into community hubs. This economic transformation has prompted calls for policies that help local economies adapt, from job retraining programs for retail workers to incentives encouraging e-commerce companies to invest in physical community presence via pickup points or partnerships with local stores. Ask. Subtopic 6. Supply chain security and trade considerations have gained importance with the growth of online commerce. Federal agencies are collaborating with e-commerce firms to strengthen the resilience of supply chains for critical goods sold online after the pandemic highlighted vulnerabilities. A White House task force has been examining how reliance on global suppliers for popular online products, from electronics to pharmaceuticals, might expose American consumers to shortages or quality issues during international crises. Lawmakers are advocating for improved oversight of imports, including more rigorous screening of e-commerce packages at ports and borders to intercept unsafe products and contraband. Proposals such as requiring country of origin labels and safety certifications for marketplace listings aim to ensure that the convenience of online shopping doesn't come at the cost of consumer safety or national security. Subtopic 7. Financial regulators are tracking how e-commerce growth influences broader economic trends, including inflation and monetary policy. Online retail has heightened price transparency, enabling consumers to compare costs across retailers instantly, which some economists believe has helped moderate inflation in certain categories through competition. The Federal Reserve and statisticians at the Bureau of Labor Statistics have noted that the Amazon effect, in which e-commerce pressures companies to keep prices low, has become a factor to consider when measuring inflation, although rising shipping expenses and supply disruptions sometimes counteract those savings. As online retail continues to expand, economists are studying its long-term impact on jobs, prices, and productivity, while policymakers weigh how to foster innovation in digital commerce without undermining key labor standards, competition, or consumer rights. 2. Amazon expands e-commerce empire, tech investments, and Prime Perks fuel growth. Paragraph 1. Amazon's latest earnings underscore its enduring dominance in U.S. e-commerce. The Seattle-based giant posted robust results with revenue growth surpassing forecasts, buoyed by booming online retail demand and strength in its higher-margin businesses. Quarterly sales jumped by double digits as inflation-driven price rises combined with increased volume, and Amazon's expanding advertising and cloud services added billions to the top line. CEO Andy Jassy noted that consumers are gravitating to faster delivery and competitive prices, validating Amazon's heavy investments in logistics. With its unparalleled scale, Amazon continues to reinvest aggressively into technology and infrastructure, from robotics to same-day delivery, to reinforce its position atop the digital commerce world. Write a deep researched 5. Paragraph 2. Cutting-edge technology and operational efficiency are central to Amazon's strategy. The company now operates over 1 million warehouse robots across its fulfillment network, boosting productivity and helping sustain profit margins amid rising costs. Amazon has broadened its one-day Prime delivery service and even piloted Amazon Now 30-minute deliveries in select cities, leveraging local micro-fulfillment centers and advanced AI-driven inventory forecasting. These moves aim to cement Amazon's promise of speed and convenience, a key advantage over rivals. Additionally, Amazon has introduced new shopping features powered by artificial intelligence, such as an AI chatbot for product Q&A and personalized recommendations, to further engage shoppers online. Industry observers say Amazon's relentless tech investments are creating a competitive moat, as few others can match its fulfillment capabilities and innovation pace. I invest. +1. Write a deep researched 5. Write a deep researched 5. +1. Paragraph 3. Amid its success, Amazon also faces headwinds. With e-commerce now a cornerstone of the economy, Amazon's influence has drawn intense regulatory scrutiny. See Topic 5. The company is battling accusations that it wields monopoly power and disadvantages competitors on its platform. Labor groups also continue to challenge Amazon's labor practices, pressing for unionization and improved warehouse working conditions. See Topic 8. Nonetheless, Amazon's vast base of 200+ million Prime subscribers and its ecosystem of services give it resilient strength. In response to scrutiny, Amazon has preemptively made some changes, offering sellers new programs and promising to keep their data confidential, as it contends that its size benefits consumers through low prices and innovation. The company's outsized role means every move, from raising Prime fees to acquiring new businesses, is closely watched by competitors, regulators, and consumers alike. Legal subtopics. Subtopic 1. Antitrust scrutiny of Amazon has escalated to unprecedented levels. The Federal Trade Commission, joined by dozens of state attorneys general, has filed a sweeping lawsuit alleging that Amazon uses exclusionary tactics to maintain a monopoly in online retail. The complaint contends Amazon punishes third-party sellers who offer lower prices on other platforms and unfairly preferences its own products and services. Amazon is vigorously contesting these claims, arguing its practices enhance consumer choice. A landmark trial is slated for late 2026 in FTC v. Amazon, and legal experts say potential outcomes range from targeted behavioral remedies to even breaking off parts of Amazon's marketplace business. The case's resolution, years in the making, could redefine legal standards for tech giants and reshape the future of American e-commerce. Tech policy. Tech policy. +1. Subtopic 2. Product liability law poses another challenge to Amazon's marketplace model. Traditionally, e-commerce platforms like Amazon claimed they were mere intermediaries, but courts around the country are increasingly holding Amazon liable as a seller of products sold by third-party vendors when those products cause harm. In California, Amazon was deemed responsible for a defective laptop battery that exploded, and other states are considering whether online marketplaces should be treated like traditional retailers for liability purposes. Amazon has responded by tightening oversight of third-party sellers and requiring them to carry product liability insurance, aiming to reduce the risk of unsafe items reaching consumers. Still, the evolving case law means Amazon and similar platforms may face greater legal exposure for defective or dangerous products in the future, potentially prompting industry-wide reforms in marketplace safety standards. Subtopic 3. Privacy and data usage are in the regulatory spotlight as Amazon's influence grows. The company's massive troves of consumer data, from shopping habits to Alexa voice recordings, have raised alarms for privacy advocates. In a recent enforcement, the FTC fined Amazon over $30 million for improperly retaining children's voice recordings from its Echo devices and mishandling home security camera footage. Although those cases involved Amazon's device ecosystem and not its retail site, they underscore that regulators are increasingly willing to impose penalties if Amazon's data practices violate privacy laws. Amazon says it is committed to protecting consumer data and has updated its privacy policies and parental controls, but lawmakers continue to press for stronger federal privacy legislation that could affect how e-commerce firms collect and use customer information. FTC. Subtopic 4. Amazon's workplace practices remain under legal scrutiny, especially with regard to worker health and union rights. In recent years, federal safety regulators have cited multiple Amazon warehouses for serious hazards and high injury rates. Repetitive stress injuries and ergonomic strains among workers reportedly exceed industry averages, spurring investigations by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. Amazon has pledged to invest in safety and training, but the Department of Labor, state prosecutors, and even the Department of Justice have probed whether Amazon's internal productivity quotas contribute to unsafe conditions. Meanwhile, the company continues to contest unionization efforts, appealing a groundbreaking union election victory at a Staten Island warehouse and fending off new organizing drives at other facilities. Changing political winds at the National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, could affect how vigorously the agency challenges Amazon's labor practices, making this an unfolding legal front for the e-commerce leader. Subtopic 5. State-level legislation is emerging to regulate Amazon's warehouse operations, adding another layer of compliance. Notably, California enacted a first-in-the-nation warehouse labor law, AB 701, to curb productivity quotas that prevent workers from breaks or safety practices. The law requires large warehouse employers to disclose performance metrics and prohibits any quota that interferes with legally mandated breaks or health measures. Amazon is adapting its California warehouse policies to comply with AB 701, and labor advocates are urging other states to adopt similar laws if the company's intense work pace is found to undermine worker well-being. Even as Amazon invests in robotics and automation to lighten human workloads, the new legal constraints underscore the growing oversight of how e-commerce giants manage their massive labor forces. Cybersecurity news. Subtopic 6. Local zoning and land use disputes are increasingly common as Amazon expands its logistics network. Communities across the country have seen proposals for new Amazon fulfillment centers, last-mile delivery hubs, and even drone test sites, which sometimes spur legal battles over traffic, noise, and environmental impact. Some municipalities have pushed back. For example, an Amazon warehouse project in Massachusetts was paused after residents filed suit citing concerns about truck congestion and air quality. Amazon often touts economic benefits like job creation to win local approval, but town councils and environmental regulators are carefully reviewing these projects. In some cases, community agreements have been negotiated requiring Amazon to take steps such as limiting truck idling, contributing to road infrastructure, or offering local hiring programs to address concerns. A sign that even e-commerce expansion at the local level now comes with legal stipulations. Subtopic 7. Mergers and acquisitions by Amazon are facing tougher reviews under U.S. antitrust policy. When Amazon sought to acquire iRobot, maker of the Roomba vacuum, for $1.7 billion in 2022, the deal was delayed by extensive FTC and European Commission investigations over potential impacts on competition and data privacy. By 2026, regulators are closely scrutinizing any potential acquisitions by e-commerce giants, especially in adjacent markets like grocery, healthcare, or entertainment. Even if not blocked outright, significant deals often come with conditions. For instance, Amazon's purchase of MGM Studios in 2022 was allowed, but with warnings the FTC may revisit so-called killer acquisitions. As Amazon's empire touches myriad industries, future acquisitions could provoke conditions to ensure they don't stifle competition or misuse consumer data, reflecting a more interventionist stance by regulators on big tech expansion strategies. 3. Social commerce booms via TikTok and social media, video apps blur shopping and entertainment. Paragraph 1. Social media platforms are reshaping online shopping, turning feeds into storefronts. TikTok, the ultra-popular short video app, has rapidly ramped up TikTok Shop features in the US, enabling users to buy trending products directly inside videos. The platform's foray into e-commerce has been explosive. TikTok's algorithm-driven shopping model is projected to see close to 60% annual GMV growth in 2026, reaching an estimated $87 billion globally. Viral videos by influencers can spark instant buying frenzies, blending entertainment with impulse purchases. U.S. retailers and entrepreneurs are swarming to social commerce, using live streams and short clips on TikTok and Instagram to showcase items to millions of engaged viewers in real time. Even established big-box brands are experimenting with in-app shops and influencer marketing on social platforms to capture younger consumers. The result is a fierce new front in the e-commerce battle, one dominated by social algorithms rather than search results. I invest. Paragraph 2. The growth of social commerce is transforming the competitive landscape of e-commerce. For Amazon and other traditional retailers, TikTok's popularity presents a strategic challenge. Industry analysts say TikTok's social shopping model is rewriting marketing playbooks. Brands now invest heavily in short-form video content and influencer partnerships to capture Gen Z and millennial buyers, who increasingly discover products via scrolling instead of search. Meta Platforms, parent of Facebook and Instagram, has also deepened its e-commerce offerings from in-app checkout on Instagram to Facebook Marketplace's expansion in new categories. As a result, U.S. e-commerce giants are adapting. Amazon has even launched a TikTok-like feed on its app to mimic the engaging, discovery-driven experience that younger users enjoy. Meanwhile, traditional search-based e-commerce still holds a trust advantage with many older consumers. Amazon's resilience has shown that wide product selection and reliable delivery can blunt the social upstart's appeal for now. Still, the lines between social media and shopping continue to blur, and retailers who harness the conversion thrive. Behind the scenes, an unusual partnership drama has also played out in the U.S., spurred by social commerce's rise. Amid rising political scrutiny of Chinese-owned apps, see subtopics, TikTok's Chinese parent company ByteDance agreed to a joint venture giving majority U.S. ownership of TikTok, a deal aimed at avoiding a potential U.S. ban in 2026. This ownership restructuring included provisions for U.S. control over data and content, while ByteDance retains a role in managing e-commerce and advertising operations. The move highlights how critical TikTok's e-commerce ambitions are to its business model. Even as TikTok navigates regulatory hurdles, its social shopping momentum in the U.S. hasn't slowed. American users are increasingly comfortable buying items through influencer recommendations, from makeup and clothing hauls to quirky gadgets going viral on their feeds. Social commerce is expected to account for a growing share of U.S. online sales in 2026, forcing every e-commerce player to think socially. Ars Technica. +1. Legal subtopics. Subtopic 1. National security concerns continue to swirl around Chinese-owned social commerce platforms. TikTok has been under intense scrutiny by U.S. lawmakers who fear that Americans' data could be accessed by the Chinese government or that algorithms might spread propaganda. In response to threatened bans, TikTok's parent company ByteDance struck a deal to transfer majority control of TikTok's U.S. operations to American-based owners, keeping user data on U.S. soil and under Oracle's oversight. The unprecedented joint venture came after a law enacted by the Trump administration required TikTok's divestment from Chinese ownership to continue U.S. operations. While this averted a ban in early 2026, some U.S. officials remain wary that the arrangement might not fully resolve national security risks. TikTok's situation has become a high-profile test case for the U.S. government's ability to regulate foreign-owned apps, a sign that e-commerce, entertainment, and geopolitics are converging in new ways. Ars Technica. Subtopic 2. Content moderation and illicit goods on social commerce platforms are under regulatory examination. The explosive growth of TikTok Shop and similar social selling features has drawn attention to potential gaps in consumer protection and product safety. State attorneys general have warned of counterfeit or unsafe products sold during live streams, noting that unscrupulous vendors can quickly pop up and vanish on social media. Existing e-commerce rules like the Informed Consumers Act, which mandates verification of high-volume marketplace sellers, may not fully cover social media sales that occur in informal channels. Regulators are exploring whether additional measures are needed to ensure that products sold via social media meet U.S. safety standards and that sellers can be held accountable. Meanwhile, platforms like TikTok say they're investing in moderation, using AI and manual review to remove prohibited items and requiring more seller disclosures to protect consumers. Subtopic 3. Transparency in sponsored content is an emerging legal focus in social commerce. The Federal Trade Commission and consumer watchdogs have increased enforcement to make sure that influencers clearly disclose when posts and live videos are paid promotions or contain affiliate links. Social media's blending of entertainment and advertising has led to deceptive marketing concerns, especially when hosts push products without making it obvious they're being compensated. The FTC's endorsement guides require influencers and content creators to use clear language like #ad or sponsored, and the agency has fined companies that encouraged influencers to hide these disclosures. With e-commerce fully integrated into social media, regulators are updating their guidelines to cover emerging forms of promotion, including haul videos and live shopping streams. By enforcing these rules, officials aim to maintain trust in social commerce by letting consumers know which recommendations are unbiased and which are paid partnerships. Subtopic 4. Children's safety and data privacy on social shopping platforms is a growing legal concern. Social apps like TikTok and Instagram have millions of teenage users, and policymakers are asking how to protect minors as shopping becomes embedded in these platforms. Some states have started passing laws requiring age verification or parental consent for minors using social media, measures aimed primarily at reducing harmful content, but also relevant for a space now pushing product sales. Advocates worry that targeted ads and impulse buy features in social shopping could exploit impressionable teen users, encouraging them to make purchases without full understanding. Existing regulations like the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA, already impose requirements on collecting personal data from children under 13, but enforcing these rules on fast-evolving platforms is challenging. As social commerce grows, expect increased regulatory scrutiny on how platforms handle young users. From verifying ages to limiting tracking and targeting of minors with shopping content. Subtopic 5. Competition concerns are also extending to social commerce. With TikTok's shopping business on a meteoric rise, traditional e-commerce players and industry groups have raised questions about whether giant social media platforms might leverage their user base to dominate online retail. So far, there are no formal antitrust actions targeting social commerce, but lawmakers have mulled expanding competition laws to ensure one or two platforms don't gatekeep key sales channels. For instance, if TikTok's algorithm prioritizes its own e-commerce listings, some competitors argue that could constitute self-preferencing behavior akin to what regulators scrutinize at Amazon. Social media companies counter that they operate in a different market and face robust competition from each other. The merging of social media and e-commerce is a novel challenge for U.S. competition law, potentially requiring updated approaches if one platform's shopping feature grows too dominant. Subtopic 6. Data security and algorithmic accountability legislation may impact social commerce. Congress is debating potential federal data privacy and algorithm transparency bills that would apply to social media companies, including those with e-commerce functions. If a comprehensive federal privacy law passes, platforms like TikTok and Instagram could face new duties around user data handling, consent, and transparency, particularly when processing sensitive purchasing data from users. In addition, some lawmakers are pushing for algorithmic transparency rules that might require companies to explain or even open up how their recommendation algorithms work. For social commerce, such rules might entail disclosures about how products are shown or recommended to consumers. While these proposals are still at early stages, the rapidly growing influence of social shopping is fueling calls for clearer regulations to ensure fairness and privacy for users navigating the blend of social feeds and storefronts. Subtopic 7. Cross-border trade and payment issues in social commerce are on regulators' radar. Social media knows no borders, and items sold via TikTok or Facebook can be fulfilled by sellers overseas, raising questions about tariff compliance and financial regulations. U.S. Customs and Border Protection is monitoring whether goods sold via social apps adhere to U.S. import rules, for example, ensuring that duty-free shipment thresholds de minimis aren't abused, see Topic 4, and that products meet American safety regulations. On the payment side, financial regulators are watching how social platforms facilitate transactions, especially as some experiment with in-app payments and even digital currencies. If users can buy directly on social media, platforms might need new payments licenses or to implement stronger anti-fraud and anti-money laundering controls, similar to other e-commerce marketplaces. This intersection of tech, commerce, and finance is fast evolving, and legal frameworks are trying to catch up. 4. Chinese retail apps face U.S. headwinds, Shein and Temu disrupt, but scrutiny mounts. Paragraph 1. Chinese ultra-fast fashion and bargain apps are shaking up U.S. e-commerce, even as they encounter growing resistance. Shein and Temu, two China-based shopping platforms, have skyrocketed in popularity by offering rock-bottom prices on trendy clothes and goods shipped directly from Chinese factories. Shein's sleek app now rivals Amazon and Walmart in download rankings, having captured an estimated 40 to 50% share of the U.S. fast fashion market within a few years. Temu, owned by Chinese tech giant PD Holdings, has similarly surged with aggressive marketing and even a Super Bowl ad, boasting tens of millions of U.S. users. American shoppers enticed by $5 dresses and cheap home goods have fueled these apps' meteoric rise, draining sales from domestic retailers. But 2025 brought a turning point. U.S. trade policies and consumer backlash are tempering these platforms' growth. New import tariffs and stricter enforcement of shipping rules are raising costs and slowing deliveries for Shein and Temu, while concerns about product quality and labor practices are souring some shoppers. Ask. +1. Paragraph 2. The U.S. government is now actively zeroing in on Shein's and Temu's business models. Under heavy bipartisan pressure, policymakers and regulators have targeted trade loopholes that helped these apps thrive, especially the de minimis import rule that previously allowed packages valued under $800 to enter duty-free. In a hypothetical high-tariff scenario, U.S. e-commerce market volume could drop below $1 trillion, and indeed Shein and Temu saw notable declines in traffic in 2025 after tariffs on low-cost goods took effect. At the same time, U.S. customs authorities are stepping up inspections of small packages, targeting illicit or underreported shipments from China. The combined impact has cut into Shein's and Temu's once breakneck growth, forcing them to adjust pricing and logistics. U.S. rivals like Amazon and Walmart, with domestic warehouses and supply chains, are capitalizing on these shifts. Meanwhile, Shein has even begun exploring opening warehouses in North America and adding U.S.-based third-party sellers to its platform to reduce its reliance on direct-from-China shipments.
Merca20.
+1.
Merca20.
+1. Paragraph 3. Shein and Temu are also facing backlash over alleged legal and ethical violations, which has invited more regulatory scrutiny. Investigations and news reports accuse Shein of exploiting workers and using cotton from China's Xinjiang region, despite the U.S. Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, UFLPA, which bans imports made with forced labor. Shein denies these allegations, but members of Congress have urged the SEC to require Shein to certify its supply chain is free of forced labor before any potential U.S. IPO. Temu has been called out by U.S. officials for similar concerns, as well as accusations that it floods the U.S. with goods that bypass normal safety checks due to de minimis shipping. American designers and brands are also waging legal battles. Dozens have sued Shein for copyright and trademark infringement, claiming the platform's suppliers knock off their designs at lightning speed. Both apps have responded by introducing some compliance measures. For example, Shein says it will better vet suppliers and Temu now highlights U.S. consumer protection info on its site. But growing skepticism suggests the era of unchecked growth for these platforms is over amid the U.S. crackdown. Ask. +1. Legal subtopics. Subtopic 1. U.S. trade policy is being reshaped in response to these cross-border e-commerce disruptors. New tariff measures targeting low-cost imports from China have been implemented, dramatically affecting Shein and Temu's business model. The once obscure de minimis rule, which since 2016 allowed Chinese sellers to ship goods under $800 without duties, is under review, and some lawmakers want to eliminate it entirely for non-market economies like China. Legislation has been introduced to bar de minimis shipments from China, which if enacted would force platforms like Shein to pay full U.S. import tariffs on every package. The result could neutralize these apps' key price advantage on ultra-cheap goods and significantly reduce their presence in the U.S. market. Trade experts note that protectionist policies, combined with inflation and supply chain shifts, are redrawing the e-commerce landscape, benefiting domestic firms with local infrastructure while undermining the rapid growth of Chinese rivals.
Merca 20.
Ask. +1. Subtopic 2. Labor and human rights laws are at the center of the U.S. response to Chinese e-commerce apps. The Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, UFLPA, enacted in 2021, created a rebuttable presumption that goods made in China's Xinjiang region, where forced labor of ethnic minorities is documented, cannot enter the U.S. supply chain. Shein has been accused of selling items containing Xinjiang cotton, a direct violation of UFLPA, prompting calls for stricter enforcement. Homeland Security officials and Customs and Border Protection, CBP, have stepped up inspections and detentions of shipments believed to involve banned inputs. Additionally, U.S. members of Congress in 2023 sent a bipartisan letter urging that Shein be required to certify it does not use forced labor if it pursues a public stock offering in the U.S. These measures signal that fast fashion e-commerce platforms must ensure ethical sourcing and labor compliance if they want sustained access to the American market, a departure from the largely unregulated environment they initially enjoyed. Ask. +1. Subtopic 3. Intellectual property, IP, enforcement is another legal battleground for Shein and Temu. American designers and brands have accused these platforms of serial design theft, lodging dozens of lawsuits claiming that independent artists' works have been copied and sold at cut-rate prices. In one 2022 analysis, it was reported that Shein faced over 50 federal cases in 3 years alleging trademark or copyright infringement. IP owners argue that Chinese ultra-fast fashion sites have built their success by skirting U.S. IP laws, overwhelming small designers who lack resources to fight constant knockoffs. In response, U.S. policymakers are exploring ways to strengthen IP enforcement for e-commerce imports, such as requiring platforms to promptly remove listings for counterfeit or infringing products. Meanwhile, courts have started imposing significant damages against foreign online counterfeiters, and platforms like Shein say they are implementing tools to detect and filter out suspected IP-infringing products. How Shein and Temu handle IP rights will be crucial to their legal viability in the U.S. going forward. Ask. Subtopic 4. Product safety and consumer protection laws are being applied to fast fashion e-commerce imports. American regulators have raised concerns that some ultra-cheap products from overseas platforms may not meet U.S. safety and quality standards. One example was a New York State investigation into a 2018 data breach at Shein, which led to a $1.9 million fine in 2022 after authorities found the company misled customers about the scope of the breach. Consumer protection agencies are also coordinating with CBP to spot-check shipments for hazardous items, such as toys containing banned chemicals or electronics, without proper certifications. There is discussion of extending recall and product tracking requirements to e-commerce marketplaces to ensure even low-cost goods sold by foreign vendors can be recalled if found dangerous. Shein and Temu have been pressed to improve safety compliance. For instance, Shein has faced scrutiny in Canada and Europe after tests found elevated levels of toxic chemicals in some apparel, and such findings amplify calls for more rigorous testing or certification of imported products in the U.S. Ask. +1. Subtopic 5. Data privacy and cybersecurity risks associated with foreign shopping apps are drawing regulatory notice. A recent congressional report highlighted potential national security concerns around the data these apps collect. Shein's mobile app reportedly requested extensive user permissions, like accessing other apps' data for marketing purposes, in exchange for shopping perks. Meanwhile, at least one Chinese parent company of an e-commerce platform was found to have embedded malware in its Chinese app, raising alarms about possible security risks in the U.S. version. Although there's no evidence the US apps contain similar malware, cybersecurity experts have advised caution, and some US states have banned these apps on government devices. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFIUS, could also review any major acquisitions or data practices by foreign e-commerce companies. In sum, legal oversight now extends to how these apps handle American user data and system security, reflecting a holistic approach to regulating foreign digital commerce entrants. Ask. Subtopic 6. Consumer sentiment and potential discrimination issues have surfaced in debates over foreign e-commerce platforms. Amid trade tensions, some U.S. consumers and lawmakers support higher tariffs or restrictions on Chinese e-commerce players. 35% of American online shoppers openly support tariffs to protect U.S. businesses. However, in imposing any restrictions, policymakers must ensure compliance with international trade laws. The U.S. has to balance national security and fairness concerns with World Trade Organization, WTO, rules that generally prohibit discriminating against imports from specific countries. If the U.S. moves to strip Chinese firms of de minimis privileges or implement targeted e-commerce duties, legal challenges could arise from trade partners or in international forums. Thus, some experts suggest narrower approaches, such as sanctioning companies proven to violate labor or IP laws, which could legally justify restricting their imports without running afoul of global trade obligations.
Merca 20.
+1. Subtopic 7. Competitive responses by U.S. companies also pose legal questions. As domestic retailers react to the threat of Shein and Temu, some have lobbied regulators to intervene, while others take their own actions. For instance, U.S. apparel and consumer groups have applauded Congress's scrutiny of Shein's practices, positioning it as a matter of enforcing existing laws to ensure fair competition. Large U.S. retailers are also working to replicate some of Shein's successful tactics, for example, by accelerating their production and supply chain cycles and offering cheaper shipping, but need to avoid any anti-competitive coordination. There are mutual accusations flying. Shein recently sued Temu, accusing it of impersonating influencers and false advertising, while Temu countersued for allegedly intimidating influencers who work with it. These legal battles between foreign upstarts themselves will be watched closely, as courts weigh novel issues in the digital marketplace like influencer poaching and app store marketing practices. The outcomes could set important precedents for competition among global e-commerce firms operating in the U.S. market. 5. Antitrust crackdown targets big e-commerce. Regulators seek to rein in market power. Paragraph 1. U.S. regulators are intensifying efforts to curb the dominance of e-commerce giants, marking a new chapter in antitrust enforcement. The Federal Trade Commission, FTC, and a coalition of state attorneys general have in recent months lodged major lawsuits alleging anti-competitive practices by online marketplace behemoths. Amazon, which captures an estimated 38% of U.S. retail e-commerce, is at the center of the largest case. The FTC lawsuit accuses Amazon of illegally protecting its monopoly by punishing sellers who list products cheaper elsewhere and promoting its own offerings preferentially, among other tactics. Amazon disputes the allegations, but the stage is set for one of the biggest antitrust showdowns in decades. The outcome could have sweeping implications for how the e-commerce industry operates, potentially forcing changes to Amazon's marketplace or even structural remedies if the FTC prevails. Tech policy. Paragraph 2. The antitrust spotlight extends beyond Amazon as well. Other tech giants with e-commerce footprints are also facing scrutiny. The Department of Justice is pursuing a high-profile monopolization trial against Google's online advertising business, with verdicts so far pushing for behavior changes rather than breakups. Apple, too, is defending both an ongoing DOJ lawsuit over its App Store practices and separate claims from Epic Games that its in-app payment policies are anti-competitive. While these aren't traditional add-to-cart retail cases, they show how online commerce in its broadest sense, including app marketplaces and payment systems, has become a focal point. Even beyond big tech, the FTC has scrutinized e-commerce mergers and acquisitions to prevent further consolidation, trigger investigations. Tech policy. Paragraph 3. 2025 proved a mixed bag for antitrust reformers, but momentum remains heading into 2026. Federal courts delivered some decisive rulings. In a historic decision, a judge found Google had monopolized parts of the online advertising market and signaled potential for structural remedies, though another judge in a separate search case preferred milder restrictions. Meanwhile, despite widespread support, Congress failed to pass new antitrust legislation targeting tech giants last year, leaving regulators to rely on existing laws. State-level initiatives are picking up some slack. California's Law Revision Commission proposed expanding its state antitrust statutes to go beyond federal standards, potentially enabling more aggressive actions under state law if adopted. As 2026 gets underway, major trials and legislative debates loom, fueled by bipartisan concerns that unchecked e-commerce monopolies could harm consumers and small businesses. The question is whether these measures will lead to meaningful changes in market structure or fizzle in the face of legal hurdles and tech companies' defense. Tech policy. Legal subtopics. Subtopic 1. FTC v. Amazon is one of the highest-profile antitrust cases in years. The FTC's complaint, filed in late 2024 after a long investigation, accuses Amazon of anti-competitive catch-and-kill tactics, such as conditioning sellers' ability to reach Prime members on using Amazon's expensive fulfillment services and preventing sellers from offering lower prices off Amazon. The FTC and state attorneys general argue these practices stifle competition and raise consumer prices. Amazon calls the case misguided and asserts that its policies are intended to ensure good customer experiences. As the case proceeds through discovery and toward trial in late 2026, legal experts are watching whether courts will be willing to impose a structural remedy, like spinning off parts of Amazon's marketplace or fulfillment division. If the FTC wins, the stakes are enormous. Any significant remedy could set a precedent for policing the power of digital platforms. Tech policy. Tech policy. +1. Subtopic 2. Industry groups are supporting the crackdown on alleged e-commerce monopolies. The Retail Industry Leaders Association, RILA, and other trade groups representing traditional retailers have Amazon's dominant intervention, the power to impose inflated fees and restrain competition. Amazon denies these allegations, but the convergence of public and private legal challenges signals a coordinated push to rein in Amazon's influence. Subtopic 3. Big tech antitrust legislation remains in limbo at the federal level. The previous Congress saw bipartisan support for proposals like the American Innovation and Choice Online Act, which sought to bar dominant platforms from self-preferencing their own products over rivals, but the bill failed to pass amid intense lobbying. Supporters plan to reintroduce similar legislation in 2026, but with a divided political climate and an upcoming election, prospects are uncertain. Without new laws, the FTC and DOJ must navigate within the boundaries of century-old antitrust statutes, which tech companies argue don't neatly apply to modern digital ecosystems. In the meantime, some members of Congress have floated establishing a specialized digital regulatory agency for platforms, an idea that faces an uphill battle but reflects growing desire to adapt regulation for the e-commerce era. Subtopic 4. Some states are pursuing their own antitrust measures to rein in tech platforms. California, home to many tech giants, is considering expanding its state antitrust law such that companies could be sued for unilateral conduct that isn't reachable under current federal law. This would give California's Attorney General more power to challenge things like certain predatory pricing or exclusionary behavior by e-commerce firms. If adopted, California's divergence could embolden other states to follow suit, creating a patchwork of stricter competition laws at the state level. Additionally, a handful of states have launched independent probes or suits against Amazon, Google, and others, at times more aggressively than federal regulators. This multi-front regulatory environment means e-commerce companies must track not only federal enforcement but also state-level legal risks. Tech policy. Subtopic 5. Remedies in tech antitrust cases are trending toward behavioral conditions, but structural breakups remain possible. Judges thus far have appeared cautious about ordering drastic breakups of tech companies, citing rapidly evolving markets. For example, in the recent Google search case, the judge imposed limits on certain business deals rather than forcing a spin-off. However, each case is different. The pending Google ad tech decision and upcoming Amazon trial will test whether courts might finally mandate a divestiture. Should the FTC win a decisive victory, one remedy on the table could be breaking apart Amazon's marketplace from its first-party retail division. Short of that, settlements might impose rules on how Amazon interacts with third-party sellers, potentially mirroring the European Union's approach of prohibiting misuse of marketplace data and guaranteeing equal treatment for all sellers. The ultimate resolution will likely take years to play out in appeals, but even interim restrictions, such as barring certain contract terms or exclusivity agreements, could reshape online retail marketplaces. Tech policy. Subtopic 6. Algorithmic pricing and data-driven coordination have emerged as new antitrust issues alongside traditional monopoly concerns. In 2025, regulators and academics raised alarms about how the use of algorithms can facilitate tacit collusion or price discrimination, sometimes in ways not easily addressed by current law. For instance, the Department of Justice reached a settlement with a rental pricing software company, RealPage, which was allegedly used by large apartment landlords to align rents, drawing parallels to a cartel-like scenario. In the retail e-commerce context, companies are increasingly using AI-driven dynamic pricing and personalized pricing based on customer data. The FTC's ongoing study of surveillance and algorithmic pricing found that companies routinely adjust prices based on personal data, a practice raising fairness concerns. New York State went so far as to ban certain algorithmic rent coordination tools. While no specific e-commerce case has been brought yet, the possibility of AI pricing tools enabling collusive outcomes is a frontier that enforcers are actively monitoring. Tech policy. Tech policy. +1. Subtopic 7. Looking overseas for antitrust policy inspiration is becoming more common. The European Union's Digital Markets Act, DMA, took effect in 2023 and imposes strict obligations on so-called digital gatekeepers, including Amazon and Meta, to ensure fair competition on their platforms. U.S. regulators and lawmakers are closely observing how the DMA plays out. For example, its bans on self-preferencing and on tying services, as they consider similar rules domestically. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom's Competition Authority has been probing Amazon's marketplace and cloud businesses with an eye toward possible intervention. While the U.S. tends to follow its own legal path, these global developments create pressure on American enforcers not to lag behind. If domestic legislative efforts continue to stall, the FTC and DOJ may lean on creative interpretations of existing law or even incorporate ideas from abroad to police the power of e-commerce giants in the U.S. 6. Data privacy and cybersecurity in online retail. Breaches spur call for tougher protections. Paragraph 1. High-profile data breaches and privacy missteps are rattling the e-commerce sector, leading to increased scrutiny from regulators and consumers. In just the past year, several major U.S. retailers have fallen victim to cyberattacks, resulting in the theft of customer information and erosion of public trust. For example, an April 2025 ransomware attack on a large UK retailer paralyzed its online sales for days, a scenario U.S. companies fear. American shoppers, now more reliant on e-commerce than ever, are increasingly concerned about how their data is stored and protected. Studies show that over half of consumers rank data security as a top concern when shopping online, and nearly 70% say a serious breach would make them stop buying from a site. These revelations have amplified calls for stronger legal safeguards to keep personal and financial data safe as it flows through retail websites and mobile apps. Cybersecurity news. Paragraph 2. Privacy regulators at both state and federal levels are responding to the e-commerce privacy challenge. Without a comprehensive federal data privacy law, states have stepped in to fill the void. California's Consumer Privacy Rights Act, CPRA, an update to its landmark 2018 privacy law, is now being enforced, requiring e-commerce companies to limit data collection and honor opt-outs for targeted advertising or face fines. Since 2023, Colorado, Virginia, Connecticut, Utah, and other states have also implemented digital privacy statutes, creating a patchwork of rules for online retailers handling consumer data. The Federal Trade Commission, meanwhile, has flexed its existing powers to penalize companies for privacy failures. For instance, it hit a large online retailer with multi-million-dollar fines after finding that it deceived users about what data it retained and for how long. In one case, voice data from children. See subtopic 3 under topic 2. The push for a unified federal privacy standard remains strong, as businesses say complying with divergent state laws is costly. However, in the current political climate, major federal privacy legislation remains stalled, so states and FTC enforcement actions will likely drive privacy compliance for e-commerce firms through 2026. Paragraph 3. E-commerce companies are also facing internal pressure to boost cybersecurity in light of mounting threats. The retail industry is now one of the most targeted by cybercriminals, and security experts warn that many online retailers have lagged in adopting advanced protections. To address this, firms are investing in AI-driven threat detection, encryption of customer data, and multi-factor authentication for administrative access. Insurers and regulators alike are urging regular penetration testing and cyber breach drills to ensure companies can respond swiftly to incidents. Consumer expectations have risen accordingly. Over 70% of online shoppers now expect immediate notification of a breach and free credit monitoring if their data is compromised. The cost of failure is high. Breaches bring not just regulatory penalties, but lost sales and class action lawsuits. Facing these realities, e-commerce businesses are adopting a zero-trust security model, treating every login and data request as potentially malicious in order to safeguard the huge volumes of personal data coursing through digital storefronts every day. Cybersecurity news. Cybersecurity news. +1. Legal subtopics. Subtopic 1. The lack of a federal privacy law in the U.S. has created a complex landscape for e-commerce companies. With no single national standard, a growing number of states have passed their own comprehensive privacy laws that often grant consumers rights to access or delete personal data and opt out of sale or sharing. As of 2026, at least 10 states, including California, Colorado, Virginia, and Texas, have enacted privacy statutes modeled loosely on Europe's GDPR, but with key differences in scope and enforcement. For nationwide e-commerce operators, this means juggling compliance with multiple regimes, tailoring data handling and cookie consent flows state by state. The business community has lobbied for an overarching federal law to preempt the patchwork, but Congress remains divided over issues like whether to allow individuals to sue and whether to override stronger state rules. Without clarity, online retailers are taking a cautious approach, often offering California-level privacy options to all U.S. users to avoid running afoul of any state's law. Subtopic 2. Rising enforcement of existing privacy and consumer protection laws is shaping e-commerce practices. Even in the absence of new statutes, regulators are creatively using current laws to police online retail data practices. The FTC has leveraged its broad authority under Section 5 of the FTC Act, Unfair or Deceptive Practices, to pursue e-commerce companies for misrepresenting data security measures or failing to protect sensitive customer data. In one notable case, the FTC recently reached a settlement with an online services provider after a massive breach exposed millions of users' financial information, using its authority to require the company to implement stringent data security improvements and pay a fine. Meanwhile, state attorneys general are on the beat too. For example, the New York Attorney General extracted a $1.9 million penalty from Shine's parent company in 2022 over a data breach affecting 39 million customers, citing violations of state consumer protection laws. These actions signal to e-commerce players that authorities won't hesitate to use every legal tool available to hold them accountable for safeguarding consumer data. Ask. +1. Subtopic 3. calls for a comprehensive federal data privacy law are intensifying as digital commerce expands. Bipartisan interest in federal privacy legislation peaked in 2025, with key committees drafting bills that would set nationwide standards for personal data usage. Proponents want a law requiring clear consent for data collection, robust security practices, and limits on how e-commerce companies can share or sell user data. Disagreements persist on issues like whether a federal law should override tougher state laws, like California's, and whether it should allow individuals to sue companies for violations. With the memory of recent breaches fresh, and with nearly every American's personal information flowing through e-commerce systems, there is mounting pressure to find common ground. Regardless, many companies are moving to adopt privacy by design principles now, anticipating that federal privacy mandates, or at least stricter state rules, are only a matter of time. Subtopic 4. Cybersecurity regulation for retailers is a growing focus as e-commerce becomes critical infrastructure. Federal agencies, such as the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, have started including the retail sector in national cybersecurity resilience planning, alongside finance, energy, and other vital sectors. Proposed legislation like the American Data Privacy and Protection Act also includes provisions to strengthen data security requirements for companies that hold large volumes of personal data, which would notably include major e-commerce firms. Some policymakers have floated the idea of mandatory cybersecurity standards for large retailers, akin to those in the financial industry, including regular penetration tests and third-party audits. Meanwhile, the FTC has issued guidance urging companies to implement encryption, multi-factor authentication, and internal access controls to protect customer data, suggesting that failure to do so could be considered an unfair practice under the law. Given the escalating threats, it's increasingly likely that e-commerce companies will face more formalized cybersecurity rules, or at least expectations from regulators to meet a higher bar, especially if breaches continue. Subtopic 5. Litigation risk from data breaches is rising for e-commerce businesses. When retailers suffer a breach exposing customer data, class action lawsuits often follow, alleging negligence in protecting that data. Courts have historically been reluctant to award damages unless victims can show concrete harm like financial loss, but that might be changing as identity theft risks become clearer. For example, in one 2025 federal court decision, plaintiffs suing a breached e-commerce company overcame initial hurdles by demonstrating they spent time and money on credit monitoring, which the judge deemed a plausible injury. This signals that e-commerce breaches can have real legal consequences beyond just regulatory fines, incentivizing companies to proactively shore up their defenses. Some retailers have responded by offering free credit monitoring to affected customers after incidents, as part of litigation settlements or preemptively to mitigate harm. Overall, the specter of high-dollar class settlements provides another legal impetus for e-commerce platforms to invest heavily in data security. Subtopic 6. Advertising and tracking regulations are squeezing online marketing tactics that many e-commerce sites and apps rely on. Restrictions on third-party cookies and stronger consent requirements, driven by browser changes and privacy laws, are making it harder for e-commerce marketers to track users across the web for targeted ads. In response, retailers are shifting to first-party data strategies, collecting information directly from shoppers via loyalty programs or on-site interactions. Regulators are monitoring this evolution. One concern is that some companies might still engage in surreptitious tracking or fingerprinting techniques to circumvent opt-outs. The FTC has warned that deceiving consumers about data collection or ignoring their privacy choices will invite enforcement. At the same time, privacy advocates push for new restrictions on hyper-targeted pricing and marketing, arguing they can lead to discrimination or manipulation, for instance, showing different prices to different demographics. The changing digital ad environment means e-commerce businesses must carefully navigate evolving privacy rules to balance effective marketing with legal compliance. Subtopic 7. Federal cybersecurity initiatives are encouraging public-private collaboration to protect online commerce. Law enforcement agencies, including the FBI and Secret Service, have urged retail companies to swiftly share information about cyber threats and breaches to help prevent broader impacts. CISA's Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative now includes retail industry partners, and Congress is considering incentives or safe harbors that would encourage companies to report cyber incidents to the government more promptly. The aim is to enable quicker alerts and stronger defenses across the e-commerce ecosystem. Some in government even discuss requiring mandatory reporting of significant cyber incidents to a federal entity, as is already required for critical infrastructure sectors, which could become applicable to very large retailers given their crucial role in the economy. E-commerce executives are thus finding themselves increasingly in dialogue with cybersecurity officials and policymakers, reflecting the new reality that securing e-commerce is now seen as part of protecting consumers and the economy at large. 7. Buy now, pay later. Under the microscope, regulators reassess easy online credit. Paragraph 1. The buy now, pay later (BNPL) boom in e-commerce is facing policy whiplash as regulators debate how to handle these popular but lightly regulated installment payment plans. Millions of U.S. shoppers now use services like Affirm, Klarna, and Afterpay at checkout, attracted by the promise of splitting purchases into interest-free payments. By 2026, BNPL has become ubiquitous on retail sites, financing everything from clothing hauls to groceries. But consumer advocates and regulators have grown increasingly wary, noting that BNPL can encourage overspending and carry hidden fees for missed payments. A new Bankrate survey found nearly half of BNPL users reported financial difficulties tied to using these services, such as overdrafts or credit score declines. As BNPL usage surges, projected to exceed $100 billion in U.S. transaction volume this year, the debate intensifies over whether BNPL should be regulated like other credit, with full disclosure of terms and consumer protections akin to credit cards. CNBC. Paragraph 2. In a surprising turn, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, announced last year that it would halt plans to implement BNPL regulations nationally. After taking an aggressive stance under the previous administration, including moves to label BNPL companies as credit providers subject to the Truth in Lending Act, the CFPB reversed course in mid-2025, citing a need to focus resources on more pressing consumer threats. This policy shift, coming under a pro-business administration, effectively removed near-term federal oversight of the BNPL industry. BNPL companies cheered the news, having argued that rigid rules like monthly statements and credit checks would confuse users and reduce a popular financing option. However, consumer advocates warn that this retreat leaves potential risks unaddressed, as shoppers can still accumulate multiple BNPL debts across platforms without traditional credit checks or debt reporting. CNBC. +1. Paragraph 3. The future of BNPL regulation remains uncertain, with signals of a possible course correction. Late fees and the ease of accumulating loans have led to rising default rates, according to industry data, and officials worry that BNPL could pose systemic risks if left unchecked. The CFPB's leadership indicates it may reconsider a formal rule, especially if evidence mounts of consumer harm and if BNPL firms don't self-police issues like clear disclosures. Meanwhile, some state regulators have begun asserting jurisdiction, treating BNPL as a form of credit under existing small loan or usury laws. For example, California's Department of Financial Protection has required BNPL firms to secure lending licenses, and state attorneys general have floated investigations into deceptive marketing or data misuse by BNPL providers. Should a new administration or Congress take a different view, BNPL could quickly face a stricter regulatory regime, which would force changes to the buy now, pay later experience on retail sites. For now, BNPL remains widely available at checkout, but regulators are keeping it on the radar as an evolving aspect of digital consumer finance. Legal subtopics. Subtopic 1. Truth in Lending Act (TILA) compliance remains a flashpoint in BNPL regulation. Traditional credit card purchases are covered by TILA, which mandates clear disclosures of interest rates, fees, and monthly statements, along with various consumer protections, like dispute rights. BNPL transactions have largely escaped these requirements, as providers have argued they are not extending credit in the same manner. In late 2022, the CFPB floated the idea of treating BNPL more like credit cards, which would have brought BNPL under TILA's umbrella, but as of 2025, the agency paused these plans. The BNPL industry contends that applying TILA would impose cumbersome rules ill-suited to their interest-free, short-term model. Still, if regulators find evidence of consumer harm, they could revive efforts to bring BNPL into the TILA framework in the future, which might require BNPL companies to perform credit checks, send billing statements, and clearly disclose late fees and other charges. CNBC. Subtopic 2. State-level regulatory action on BNPL is emerging in the absence of federal oversight. A handful of states are exploring using existing small loan or consumer finance laws to cover BNPL plans, which typically involve loans spanning a few weeks or months. Under some state laws, charging late fees or other fees might classify BNPL as a credit product requiring a lender license or interest rate compliance. For instance, California's financial regulator in 2020 determined BNPL companies must be licensed and comply with state lending laws, which include refund and disclosure standards, leading major BNPL firms to obtain California lending licenses. Other states are monitoring BNPL providers under their own credit laws, particularly if the providers attempt to charge interest on longer-term installment plans. Moreover, some state attorneys general have signaled that they may use their consumer protection powers to police deceptive BNPL marketing, for example, failing to clearly warn of late fees or consequences of missing payments. This growing state interest means BNPL firms may face a patchwork of rules similar to the broader privacy discussion, adding complexity to their operations. Subtopic 3. Credit reporting and debt collection practices for BNPL are another legal frontier. Historically, BNPL loans were not routinely reported to credit bureaus, meaning consumers could take out multiple BNPL plans without affecting their credit score, but also without building credit for positive history. Recently, however, some BNPL providers and credit bureaus have begun incorporating BNPL transactions into credit files, a development that raises compliance issues under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, FCRA. BNPL companies must ensure accuracy in reporting and handle disputes properly, just as credit card issuers do. Additionally, consumer advocates warn that some BNPL lenders may resort to aggressive debt collection tactics or use arbitration clauses to limit user recourse, which could run afoul of state debt collection laws or draw scrutiny from the CFPB under its debt collection authority. As BNPL scales, expect increased regulatory focus on how these companies handle delinquent accounts and communicate with borrowers. Subtopic 4. Data privacy in BNPL services is under scrutiny. BNPL providers often collect detailed shopping data across merchants, which can be used for targeted marketing or even underwriting. If BNPL firms share user data with third parties for advertising or other purposes, they must abide by relevant privacy laws, including new state statutes. See Topic 6. There's also a potential for BNPL data to be used in consumer credit decisions, raising fair lending questions. Some privacy advocates fear BNPL payment history could be used to profile consumers in ways they haven't consented to. So far, there's no specific BNPL privacy law, but the CFPB has authority to examine larger BNPL providers for data security and privacy practices, and it has warned that excessive data harvesting, such as app scanning users' social media or bank account information, could be deemed unfair if not properly disclosed. Providers are expected to handle sensitive financial data with care, or they may face regulatory action under existing privacy and consumer protection statutes. Subtopic 5. Competition and market concentration in the BNPL industry are being watched by regulators. The BNPL field consolidated somewhat in recent years, with major players Affirm, Klarna, and Afterpay, now owned by Block/Square, capturing much of the market. If BNPL continues gaining share from traditional credit, or if fewer players dominate, antitrust regulators could examine whether the market remains competitive. For instance, if one provider were to achieve a dominant position or attempt to acquire a rival, the FTC or DOJ could consider a challenge. Additionally, the integration of BNPL into e-commerce platforms